Hello, everyone, and welcome to Student Housing Unlocked, multi-housing news' podcast series that delves into investment strategies, operations, and various approaches in the student housing sector. I'm Olivia Bunescu, Senior Associate Editor, and for this episode, I'll discuss with Daniel Bernstein, President and Chief Investment Officer at Campus Apartments. We will explore the evolving demands of student housing management and the operational intensity of the sector. Dan sheds light on how the company is getting ready for the new academic year, strategies that work for student housing, and how their approach is influencing students' living experience.
Hi, Dan. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation to Student Housing Unlocked, the podcast series that delves into everything student housing related. Today, we'll discuss a bit about managing trends and how Campus Apartment is getting ready for the new academic cycle.
Great. Thank you for having me, Olivia. Nice to be here.
I'll start with the first question. And how would you describe the current fundamentals in the student housing market? And how have those been reflected across your portfolio from a rent growth and also a leasing rate perspective?
Sure. First off, truly happy to say that the fundamentals in the student housing sector remain incredibly strong, not just compared to itself historically, but I guess compared to other real estate sectors as well. So we've enjoyed several years of outsized rent growth and strong occupancies across our portfolio for sure. And I guess more specifically, we've sat at over 98% across our student portfolio last academic year. We're close to 99% pre-leased at this juncture for the upcoming academic year, and that's almost 2% higher compared to this time last year. And rental rates are also up a little, over 6% across our student portfolio. So I think that signals continued strength heading into the 25-26 academic year and hopefully beyond.
Mm-hmm. And did you notice any interesting trends for the upcoming academic year, and also where did you see the most demand when it comes to student housing?
Well, I guess from a demand standpoint, I think it's fair to say, generally speaking, at least, that demand has been strongest at your tier one public and private institutions across the country. And I think that stands to reason as kind of like the consolidation of the higher education sector continues, or at least is perceived to continue. Students are, beginning to steer away from tertiary and lower tier secondary schools and increasingly choosing institutions that demonstrate a clear value proposition.
Mm-hmm.
As far as trends, I guess we continue to see a flight to what we would say value from a student perspective and their parents. And while it may be accurate to say that, most students prefer things like proximity to campus, and bed bath parity, well-attached communities, and laundry, et cetera, all of those kind of things, it doesn't work in, at any price in every market. So you could build the nicest, newest, most well-amenitized property in the market, but unless you can demonstrate your true value proposition vis-a-vis, other properties in the market, you can't always name your price. You really need to understand the landscape of the particular submarket, as well as the demographic and the psychographic of that particular student population and what motivates them in their decision making.
All right, since we got into the discussion about value for students, we know that student housing isn't just about four walls and a bed anymore. How is Campus Apartments redefining the idea?
That's a great question, and one we think about a lot. So first off, we're the de facto parents, and as my partner David likes to say, we're taking care of arguably the most important thing in someone's life, which is their child, and we take that responsibility very seriously. So it's really important to make all parties feel safe and comfortable and in this new environment that they're living in. And it's also all about developing a sense of community to support our residents kind of socially and academically. And this really manifests itself in so many areas, how we design and program all of our social spaces and apartment units, our wellness and social programming, our amenity offerings like our fitness centers and indoor and outdoor gaming areas, our technology infrastructure, how we communicate with our residents, which sadly for some, at least older folks like me, it's almost exclusively online anymore. And even the swag or the gear that we offer our students. But it's also important to note that student expectations are fluid and have changed over the years too. So we have to change. So we've had to evolve, as well in our efforts to kind of meet or exceed the expectations and make our communities look and feel more like home, kind of help create or define a sense of home as they transition from being under their parents' roof to underneath, kind of a roof of their own, so to speak.
And if we're talking about amenities, what are the things that students look for most nowadays? What are they willing to pay more for, so to speak?
Well, from an amenity standpoint, it's kind of all over the board. But I think if we're talking about, is the question really about value or like luxury amenities?
Value.
So I guess the way we think, at least when we talk about value that students are looking for, we typically think in the context of a property's value proposition, as I mentioned before, and you'll probably hear me say that quite a bit. But in other words, in a particular off-campus market, how compelling are the attributes of property A, relatively speaking, to its price or other available options? And answering that question requires familiarity with the nuances of a particular campus culture, the weight that is to certain property characteristics, and the scarcity within that market. So, for instance, at Clemson University, a downtown location that offers walkability to campus, nightlife, and retail, that's really important, and that's only in one particular location there. So this attribute is highly valued and very scarce in that particular marketplace. So as a result, when we developed the downtown projects where students really wanted to live, they were willing to pay a premium to live there. Whereas in other markets, like the University of Central Florida, proximity to campus really doesn't, unlike the Clemson example, proximity to campus really doesn't provide much pricing power because the university is expansive and people drive and they have a robust shuttle system. So those are just an example of how students and campus cultures assign different values to the same attribute. And it's really, that's why value is kind of tough to peg. So kind of given the breadth of the markets we operate in, I'd say it's very important to appreciate the subtle differences. Certain things might translate like fast internet or pools with an infinity edge, but we generally avoid assuming this one size fits all approach and assume that people are willing to pay more for that.
And since we're also discussing the students' expectations, how are you approaching programming and community building in a way that resonates with today's students' needs?
We like to foster environments that promote, both academic and social growth. So, whether it's through mental health advocacy or what we call cause-driven play or service-focused partnerships, our goal really is to create communities where our residents don't just live, but, connect and hopefully thrive. So our programming approach is deeply informed by our students and feedback driven. So we conduct ongoing surveys throughout the leasing cycle to understand how residents are feeling and what they value, or how we can better serve them, academically or socially or emotionally. And I like to think that we lead by example and try to demonstrate that we're really good corporate citizens and truly connected with their well-being and the well-being of others. And we're intentional in this regard. So I think that authenticity really resonates with our residents, and I guess some examples of it in action are that one, we're a founding participant in a program called Hello, How Are You? And that's a mental health initiative. I'm not sure if you've heard, but it's led by the Mental Health Coalition. And through this partnership, we've helped to deploy mental health surveys to residents across our communities and gain some critical feedback. I guess we're also committed to community engagement through partnerships like Team Impact, which is an amazing organization. It connects children facing serious illnesses with the college sports team. And this has been a really impactful partnership as it's helped to empower our student residents and support meaningful causes and kind of cultivate what we like to say is a purpose-driven community. I guess maybe another good example is we work with a group called Outside. It's outside with an O, but would spell with an A. It's a Texas-based organization that raises money for children with autism, and they do it by promoting kind of community, inclusivity, and play through these really cool outdoor recreation products like cornhole and mega Jenga. And we make these outdoor games available to our residents across all of our properties. And through that, we encourage them to step outside and enjoy the physical and social benefits of outdoor recreation.
That's really nice. I actually heard about the Mental Health Coalition and the project. I wrote an article about it a few years ago.
It's amazing.
I've been following the research regarding the project. I'd like to move a bit into your property management strategy. And I want to know what's top of the mind right now as you gear up for the new student housing cycle. Are there any shifts in your playbook this year when it comes to leasing and operations, or is it about doubling down on your efforts that are already working?
I'd say what's really top of mind right now is turn because we're in turn season and it's truly an incredibly busy time of year for us. Once we get through that, the new leasing season begins. So I imagine rate setting for the 26-27 academic year will be top of mind soon enough. But I'd say otherwise really no real dramatic shifts when it comes to leasing and marketing. It really is about doubling down and staying committed to what has proven successful for us, and that includes it's pretty somewhat straightforward, but continued focus on the customer. We put a premium on staying in touch with our residents and making sure they still feel satisfied and well taken care of. It includes making sure we're in tune with the universities that we are serving and any developments or trends that may adjust our approach, such as shift in enrollments or programs or student demographics. And I guess third would be the just continuing to evaluate the underlying market fundamentals and, which could also affect, our approach to leasing and marketing for the upcoming year. So it's really, much of the same and, doubling down.
And what do you think are some of the biggest challenges in student housing management, and how do you approach those?
First off, student housing is operationally intensive, full stop. And we've been doing this a really long time and we've got a phenomenal team, but the fact that we are vertically integrated owner operators, I think is really what gives us an edge and allows us to anticipate or react quickly to challenges that arise, from property operations, facilities and capital project staffing, and regional managers and marketing and leasing specialists, asset managers and our investment team, HR, our technology group, our property accounts, our finance team. It really does take a village. But as far as the challenges, I guess I'd say the biggest challenge from an operational standpoint or challenges would be turn, which I was just mentioning, as we basically have, and we're in it now. But as we basically have 2 weeks during the summer to turn and make ready the majority of our units. And I'd say, and you've probably heard before as well at this point, but it's, the very compressed and kind of nuanced leasing cycles that exist in a market. Unfortunately, just because we have scale and operate across the country doesn't mean that we can apply like a one size fits all approach to leasing and marketing. Each market varies with regard to its timing and approach. Some markets start pre-leasing, almost immediately after residents move in and wrap before the end of the year. Others may not really start in earnest until Thanksgiving, but I'd probably continue all the way through the summer. And as far as training, we've really been doing this a long time. And as previously mentioned, our vertical integration is one of our true superpowers. Having all of the various disciplines under one roof or in the same cockpit, so to speak, is incredibly helpful, not just in developing and delivering training, but in providing ongoing support structure and, and perspective. It really is a game changer.
And I know that you said just now that you don't have a one size fits all approach, but how do you maintain brand consistency since you have a geographically diverse portfolio on housing properties?
You're asking the tough questions. Again, it's mentioned before, just because we've been doing this a long time and have operated in 30 odd some states over the years doesn't mean we can take that one size fits all approach. I think many have tried and failed in the past, but and by design we have a very diverse portfolio of assets, older assets, newer assets, high rise, mid rise, urban, suburban, et cetera. So each community will be unique in some way or another, which adds a challenge. But what we can do, however, is lean in heavily to our corporate infrastructure for support and guidance, and as importantly, to set the tone and help to create standards for how we want to operate as a company, and and as importantly, what kind of experience we want to create for our residents, regardless of the location or the quality of the building. And it really all starts with what we say, and it's funny, we have this on our wall at every single community we have in the management office, but it starts with the kind of the commitment to the core values of the company and what we like to call as our CA Pact. And the PAC stands for passion, authenticity, community, and thoughtfulness. And this PAC, these core values are non-negotiable for us, and they're the foundation of our brand. So it's our promise to our residents, it's our promise to our partners, and to ourselves internally within the company. So it permeates everything that we do. and it helps us to, hopefully maintain a consistent brand standard.
And if you had to predict one trend that will reshape student housing management or influence it in a way in the next couple of years, what would it be?
I think this is certainly an incredibly hot topic and might deserve its own podcast at some particular point. But I think hands down the answer would have to be, AI, or more specifically, the implementation of AI and AI solutions into our everyday workflow. It's so incredibly powerful, really unlimited possibilities, whether it's for design or resident communications or accounting functions, leasing and marketing, research, you name it. And it's likely to radically change the way we do things in coming years. And we're already looking into it, and we use it in some of our applications now, and constant evaluation, but looking to expand our use for sure.
Have you applied it in any parts of the student housing management or experience?
We have in some ways in terms of creating some visuals and some marketing materials. We've used it in some of our property management functions, accounting functions, with regard to looking at things like delinquency and, how to understand which resident has a pattern, or just kind of really to kind of collect and collate and aggregate information in a more efficient way. But a lot of times some of the in-place third-party software programs have an AI component to them as well.
You might be right. I actually might need to do a whole episode on AI.
Absolutely.
And finally, what's something that you think most people in the industry misunderstand about managing student housing? What's the nuance that only becomes clear once you're in the industry?
I think this is an easy one, and it's informed by history and past attempts, but so many outsiders underestimate how operationally intense and complex and unique student housing is. When the conventional multifamily market sometimes ebbs and flows, the student housing sector is doing well because it's relatively more recession resistant. New entrants into the market, they figure, I built or bought housing before, and I've managed housing before, but they really come to learn very quickly that it's radically different. As we discussed, leasing is cyclical, students change differently, markets are nuanced in different ways, and there's also not as much transparency in the student housing sector in terms of information and access compared to others. You have to have proprietary systems or into certain third-party systems. So success requires a real understanding of these nuances, the demographic, psychographic shifts, institution-specific demand, and how to navigate the nuanced landscape. Well, it's certainly not for the faint of heart, but fortunately, it's definitely for us.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for anyone looking to get into student housing or investing in student housing?
I think absolutely. And this is also evidenced by the fact that we are called by banks and lending institutions and other institutional partners in the that come to us when somebody's trying to get in, or do we know these folks, or what do you think about this particular deal and the like. And so I'd say that if you're looking from an investment standpoint, link up with a really good sponsor, somebody that knows the business and has been in the business, as it certainly is unique. It's what they call an alternative investment and a specialized investment. And if you're going to buy or invest, I would say you should link up with a reputable manager, someone that knows space and its nuances, and before you give it a shot at going it alone. But it really is it's a great sector for sure. And we've, knock on wood, we've really enjoyed a great run, even through COVID, where we've outperformed conventional multifamily as well. And I'm proud of the space, proud of what we do. And yeah.
I'm happy to hear that. I also like student housing a lot.
Great. That's excellent. You probably are more informed than many investors trying to get in based on the investigations you do in the podcast and the guests that you have on your show.
Well, we have to be.
Yes, right.
So, yeah.
For sure.
That was my last question. So thank you very much for accepting my invitation. It was a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, appreciate the conversation. Always appreciate the, kind of getting the word out more and more about student housing and debunking some of the myths, or, just highlighting it in general.
Thank you for listening to Student Housing Unlocked. Make sure to tune in for the next episode of our series. For more news, trend stories, and podcast episodes, visit multihousingnews.com. Don't hesitate to join MHN's Executive Council. Every month, we discuss the latest trends and topics with leading experts in the field, and your input could be extremely helpful. To join, please send an email to jessica.fiur@cpe-mhn.com. Looking forward to seeing you on our next episode.